Yes. Welcome, YouTube Live and those watching the replay. It is such an honor to be here with you today on this lovely December midday. Today, I'm really excited to explore your power of creation. The theme of this month is ceremony. And so we're using each of these YouTube Lives to explore what ceremony actually looks like and how you want to incorporate it into your business. And today we're going to kind of go deeper into understanding your role as a powerful, conscious, deliberate creator so that you can bring your ceremony in alignment with the mode of creation that you want to use and just continue to bring more consciousness and sacredness to everything that you're doing. This whole teaching arose out of something that, you know how when like something almost, it's like the community is chewing on it collectively and you start to see the same concept being spoken about or memed about or whatever on social media in multiple ways from multiple people, all kind of saying the same thing. You know what I'm talking about? This was one of those things for me. And the thing that I was seeing was that you can change by running away from something, or you can change by running towards something. And the action is the same. Like the little stick running man is doing the same thing, running. Either way, so on the surface they look the same, but the energy underneath them is quite different because one of them is coming from vision, expansion, desire, enthusiasm, gratitude, where the other one is coming from fear. So let me know if this is making sense. I want to just like check in. Can you guys conceptually understand what I'm talking about? Right? That you can, in other words, anyone that's listening to me is wanting to create something more in their lives, more money, more impact, more integration, more power, more visibility, more love, right? And so, so everyone that's here is running towards something. They're running in the direction of something. So the question is, are you running toward that thing from the energy of desire and enthusiasm and power, or are you running away from something else? So this was the meme. This is what everybody was talking about. Yes, Laura, powerhouse. She's amazing powerhouse. I'm so honored that you're here. So when I first started hearing about this, it was just a question of like, oh, like I both work, but which one do I want to do? Of course, I don't want to be running from the thing I'm afraid of nearly as much as I would like to run towards something. So then I had a conversation with an old mentor of mine about this, who she really is the person who spoke to me about this the most. And we were talking about something that she was working on developing in her own life and her own business. And over the course of the conversation, this theme came up again. And she said, you know, what I've learned is that it's much harder to create from vision. It's much harder to create from vision. And I thought, are you kidding me? This is what you taught me to do. What do you mean it's harder? And she was like, you know, because my life is great. Like, I don't really need anything to change. It's harder to access that fuel supply. And so then that got me thinking about it. From all of that came a new framework. And I'm really excited to share it with you because it feels like revolutionary, super powerful, very direct, very helpful. And it's built on that framework, that premise. So I'm going to get a little esoteric with you just for fun because I think you guys will be into it. An esoteric reference that I'm going to make is to something called the gunas, which come from India. This is the whole Bhagavad Gita is just filled with references to the material world and the three gunas. So this is my favorite copy of the Bhagavad Gita, Yaneshwar's Gita. I just referred to this at my live event. So those of you that were with me will recognize this. I love this text. It's hundreds of years old, maybe thousands actually. This particular translation is just maybe 500 years old, but I think that the Bhagavad Gita is much older than that. And in it, over and over and over again, are referenced the three qualities. And if you don't know what that is, it's actually kind of hard to understand the Bhagavad Gita because it comes up so often. In short, the three qualities are the three basic elements of anything in our material experience. So stay with me here. The first is goodness, purity, light. The second is passion. It is anger, intensity, fierceness. The third is ignorance, stagnation. The Sanskrit names for these are, yeah, that's right. I love that you guys love the esoteric. That's so great. So the goodness, that mode of goodness is called sattva or sattvic. And you might have seen this if you go to like Ayurvedic Indian restaurants, they'll talk about, they make sattvic food. It's meant to be very luminous, very good, very pure, very clean. Rajas is the name of that in-between mode. That's the mode of passion, of intensity, anger. A lot of creativity comes from there also. None of these are good or bad. They're not said to be good or bad. They're just different. So Rajas is that second mode of passion, or you could call it Rajasic. And then the final mode is called Tamas or Tamasic. That's the mode of ignorance or stagnation. So the idea is that literally everything that you see or experience in this material world falls into one of those three categories. And if you go deeper, what you'll read is that actually there's the mode of goodness or sattva, there's the mode of ignorance or tamas, and that the rajas, the middle mode or guna, is a combination. So you can even think about it as like there's really just two modes and then the one that's a combination. So that's a fun experiment just on its own, to look at everything in your life: plants, furniture, a cup of tea, stuffed animals, crystals, feelings, relationships, and just kind of filter or categorize them all through the lens of these three modes. So, I mean, I've known about these for over a decade. I studied this stuff when I first started traveling to India, which was over a decade ago, with my meditation teacher at the time. Learned all about this stuff. The truth is I haven't thought about it too much lately. Like anytime I read the Bhagavad Gita, I remember, I know what these things are, I just kind of move on. But when my old mentor said this thing to me, it prompted me to start chewing on it in a new way. And my breakthrough clarity was all about these three modes of creation. So stay with me here because I think this is really fun. The gunas, these three modes of the material world, sattva, rajas, and tamas, these are descriptions of the material world. My proposal to you, that's what's known, that's what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. My proposal to you today is that they also describe the three modes of creation. Because when we create, which we're always doing, we're doing it in the material world. Our results, our environment, our circumstances, our relationships, our physical environment, like all that stuff is matter. It's all in the material world. So anything that we're creating is not only showing up in one of those three modes, goodness, passion, or ignorance, it's also being created from those three modes. And this, I feel, is a huge, huge, huge insight. So what does it mean if you are creating from a place of ignorance or stagnation? Let's start with that. There's two pieces of this. One is you're looking at reality, whatever it is that you're used to, and unconsciously assuming that that's all there is. And so you create more of the same. You don't even, in this state, you don't even know that you're creating because you're ignorant of your own power. That's the only way that this really happens, is that you're in your creative mode, just kind of churning out more and more and more of the same. And I want to always just layer in, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not bad. It's just the level of your consciousness in that area. Most people are doing that around money because they've never been taught to do anything else. So most people, and let's just focus on America, because America is kind of famous for the American dream, where you can go out and you can create anything. There's tons of class mobility. It's like technically possible for you to do whatever you want with money. But the reality is that most people continue to live at the same relative class level that they grew up in general. There's exceptions, of course, but in general, that's the trend. That is because most people are creating their financial story from a place of unconsciousness, from a place of ignorance, from a place of stagnation. They're looking at their current reality, assuming that that dictates what's coming, and they just produce more of the same. You guys with me? Anybody relate to that? Any stories that come up when you hear me say that? I would love to hear that in the chat. The second mode of creation, if we're thinking about the gunas in this way, is from that rajasic place, from a place of passion, from a place of contrast. So when we're creating from a place of passion, I'm going to say that that's the running away from. There's some consciousness because we're like, we want to change. We're not in total ignorance or denial or stagnation. But there's also a lot of attachment to what was, because that's really what's motivating us to change. This is definitely not a bad thing. I mean, this is a very powerful fuel source. Contrast is a very powerful fuel source. When you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. When you know what you don't want to experience, it can activate and mobilize you to make a change. And in fact, I would say that for most people, that's the way that they make change to begin with, universally. Unless they're an alien or enlightened being come as a bodhisattva to live in this lifetime, right? Like if they're a human being living in the material world, the first and sometimes all of the change that they make in their life is coming from this rajasic, passionate, contrasty experience. I don't want that. Let me run toward something else. I don't want that. Let me run away from that. I got to create something else. Okay? You guys with me? Give me a little thumbs up, a like, comment. Let me know that you're with me. I want to make sure you guys are getting this. The third mode of creation is sattvic, goodness, purity, light. This is what my old mentor was saying was difficult for her. And this is also embedded in the Vedic teachings. So yes, great. Okay, good. Great. So let's talk about what it is first, then we can talk about why it's hard. So when you are truly free of the past, you're just in the present moment, you know that all is happening for your benefit, all has happened for your benefit and the benefit of all. There's no problems. There might be contrast, but you don't experience it as a problem. It's just like, oh, interesting, like that's going to help with this thing, or that's going to change this thing, right? Like you can kind of be at peace, at one with all that's happening. When you're in that pure, connected, devotional space, from that place, you can see, I'm meant to go this direction. Not because there's some terrible thing that's happening, because I'm generally grateful for everything that's happening in my life. There's nothing wrong, but I can just feel that more wants to come through me. Maybe even I want more, but it's a very different kind of desire than most people experience. It's like, it's much more an inner guidance, a calling, right? The sattvic mode of creation is a calling. This is where I'm meant to go. And then you move in the direction of that vision. That's my proposal for creating from the mode of goodness. Why is that hard? In the scriptures that come from India, they talk about how we live in a very Rajasic time, you could say. We live in a very loud time in history. It's a very chaotic time in history. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of innovation. It's a very mixed bag, right? Like particularly 2019 moving into 2020. It's the most intense, passionate time in history. So the suffering that people experience is very motivating, right? Like if everything's good, hi Kate, welcome. If everything's good, why change? That's the sort of challenge of living only in the mode of goodness, of creating only in the mode of goodness. And it is, again, not to say one is good or bad. It's funny because the mode of goodness is not good. That's a semantic thing. So just like, that's why it's useful actually to use the Sanskrit, because you can let go of whatever associations you have in your mind about the word good. When you're creating from that mode of lightness, of luminousness, of vision, you've got to be so dedicated to the realization of that vision. And the fuel source from that can't come from contrast. It can't come from things not being good enough. It can't come from things not working. It's funny that's happening. That's my my low blood sugar alert. It's telling me like, Jesse, you need some sugar. So this is an interesting moment. Like to me, this is the Rajasic, right? This is telling me something's got to change. Go fix it, Jesse. There's something off. Drink a little more of my tea. And I'm going to let you know by beeping in your ear. So that's why I think it's so helpful to look at these things in a much more unconditional, non-judgmental frame, because it's not bad. This is very helpful. When you're, that's Shri is also helpful, but right, the little notification, like there's something off, go take action. Okay, great. That's the Rajasic mode. Better than Tamasic, where like, 100 years ago, there's no technology and maybe I just pass out and die because I don't have enough sugar, right? Diabetes was a fatal illness 100 years ago. Now there's all these tools and technologies to wake us up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. That's the Rajasic mode. Wake up and do something. Wake up and change. More is possible for you. What do you want? Go make it happen, right? The Sattvic mode is what most people think they want. That most people think they want. I want to be happy and just feel good and grow from there. It's possible. I think it's the direction that we're all headed. But it's more difficult because why change when things are so good? Why change when everything's working out? So, what are your questions about this subject? Which mode do you want to create from and why? How do you want to relate to your own creative power? No right answer, no wrong answer. What do you see? Part of the reason that I wanted to bring this up for you guys, and I'm just going to keep talking while you guys put your questions, but I'm looking for your questions. And if you're watching the replay, I will read your questions when they come in and respond in the comments or in a future video. So please, anybody that's got questions, bring them. Most people are walking around wishing that their lives were perfect so that they wouldn't have to change anymore. We are all here for continuous change, continuous growth, continuous expansion. And part of what fuels that is the contrast. That's not the only way it can happen. We know that, but it's a very easy way for it to happen. And we can speak some of us from experience that when we get to the point where our lives are just like, things are great, there's nothing else that I really need to change, we lose our urgency to grow. So my recommendation, whichever mode of creation you're in and whichever mode of creation you want to be in, is that you practice gratitude for whatever it is that's mobilizing you to change. So when things are not the way you want, that you're like, fantastic, because this is motivating me to change. And that when things are so good that you could kind of just like ride the wave, that you recognize like, oh, I'm entering into the sattvic mode of creation. I'm going to need to really stay attentive in order to stay connected to my fuel supply, because otherwise I'm just going to chill. I'm just going to coast. How does this show up in sales? I cannot tell you how often people make sales and then stop. They make a sale, they feel really accomplished. They enter into that sattvic mode, like, I can be grateful for everything. I have everything that I want. I'm just going to chill. And they disconnect from their fuel supply. Maybe a more articulate way of saying that is that they evolve out of their previous fuel supply because their life is so good. And the opportunity is to then connect to a new fuel supply, which is vision. But that transition is one that most people don't make. And when they don't make that, then they're running on empty. Even though things look and feel good, they're running on empty because they've disconnected from their fuel supply. And it's going to like gradually or quickly bring them back to contrast. I actually really like the idea that these are a loop. It's not tamas, ignorance and stagnation, rajas in the middle with passion, and then sattva. It's a loop. When you are too long in the sattvic mode and you get too complacent, you naturally flow back into stagnation. So I'm just like riffing with you now on the fly. So be grateful for your tolerations. Your tolerations come from that tamasic place, from that stagnant place. And when they get bad enough, then they bring you into that passionate, like, I want change. This is no longer sufficient. I want to wake up. Okay, great. Let's wake up. It mobilizes you to change. Then you move into creating the thing that you want. And then you're at a new fork in the road. When you created the thing that you want, you're at a new fork in the road. You get to either consciously find something new to mobilize your urgency in order to continue to change. You get to mobilize from a place of vision, or you risk falling back into tamas. This is really fun. Yes, 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 yes. I'm excited to create from no longer tolerating and taking huge steps to do that. So, and yeah, this is a great question. So Lauren saying, I don't know which of the three that is. So to create from recognize a consciousness around toleration. So toleration falls into tamas or stagnation, right? Tolerations are defined by the sustaining acceptance of something that isn't actually in alignment with your vision. So when that toleration, when you kind of come to the place where you're like, no more of this, that's powerful, because it means that you are accessing all the energy that comes from the rajasic mode of creation, or the passionate mode of creation, where you are using contrast to mobilize change. And when I say contrast, I'm kind of using that in an Abraham Hicks way, like where you're using something that's not wanted, something that's not working, something that you don't want, to propel you in a new direction. Lauren, does that make sense? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, great. Yes. Okay. And Kate, I totally relate to this kind of sales. I desire to connect to my inexhaustible fuel supply. That's why I'm here. This is really, really powerful. So Kate's wanting to create from vision, from sattvic truth. And that's so beautiful. I think that's the direction that we're all going. And just recognize that that mode of creation is naturally less angsty. I mean, that's why we want to live there, because it's like, it sounds so good. But the actual truth is that when you're living there, you have to connect to a different fuel source, or you will stop growing. The fuel source there is vision. And actually, here's another way to say this. I think this will connect the dots for some people. Devotion. Right? That we are here to grow, not because we're avoiding something unwanted, but because we want to give back to the divine source that created us all. Because we want to be our best, biggest selves in service to the divine. That devotion is the fuel source in the sattvic mode of creation. So this is really fun. I feel like we uncovered a lot, unpacked a lot. Any other questions that come through, please let me know. Those of you that are coming to India with us, we are definitely going to talk all about this, because we'll be all up in the 3 modes of the material world. That'll be very explicit. And I know that those of you that are tuning in remotely will catch glimmers of what we're working with, because it's going to be very, very powerful. We're going to go deeper with these teachings. Next week, we will be explicitly celebrating 2019. So if you're wanting a little support or structure to close out and complete 2019, we're going to do that together, and it's going to be really fun. So bring your notepads, journals, writing utensils, creative materials, because that's the direction that we're going to go to create a little ceremony around closing out 2019. And let me actually say one more thing about ceremony, because I want to connect the dots there. Ceremony is what will make the Rajasic mode of creation more delightful, more gratitude filled. It will kind of take it into its more sattvic balance. And I think that ceremony also will catalyze more change when you're just in the sattvic mode of creation, right? So ceremony by its nature is a very gratitude-filled, celebratory, positive, luminous activity. In general, there's not a whole lot of stagnation or passion in ceremony. It can be, but mostly the ceremony is coming from that very luminous place. And so when you use ceremony in a Rajasic space, you're amplifying the light. You're amplifying the mode of goodness. You're amplifying that, just like kind of shifting the balance of light in the space of dark, which can be really fun and helpful. And when you're just like, life is so good, what do I do now? Ceremony. Create ceremony to catalyze change. Create ceremony to mark the end of one phase and the beginning of another. Create ceremony to celebrate. Create ceremony to catalyze new vision. Create ceremony around visioning in the first place. So that's what we're going to do next week. Our next week's ceremony is going to be very much based on the sattvic mode of creation. So we'll kind of keep developing this. So in the next week, I invite you to create a ritual to claim the power of your creation moment to moment. So gratitude is a really good ceremonial tool. All of your spiritual objects are great ceremonial tools. And writing, words, verbal, whether you're speaking, singing, writing, claiming, using language is also a very powerful ceremonial tool. So play with that, enjoy that. Let me know how that goes. And we'll see you next week for our closing and completing of 2019, really honoring with a ceremony that this last 12 months. And this last decade too, we'll do a little decade ceremony too. Enjoy the rest of your day. Such an honor and pleasure to be with you all. I'm sending you guys tons of love and encouragement and gratitude and blessings for whatever path of creation you're on. Enjoy.